Hello and welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Soebbing. We're at the tail end of our free motion quilting series where we're teaching you 4 basic free motion quilting stitches using stencils to help develop your muscle memory, and then showing you how you can customize them to your heart's content to create an infinite number of possibilities for your next quilt. We are working on wavy lines. This is the last segment in our series. In our last video, we did the stencil version of it. I recommend you watch that first and you follow along with the stencil so you can help develop the muscle memory of moving that quilt back and forth to create a wavy line. Now this one we're going to do without stencils because that's the goal. You're eventually supposed to be able to get to the point where you don't need the stencil to do it. We're using crosshatch wavy lines. This is a really great all-over stitch, but you can also do it within blocks as well. All right, let's get started. So as always, we're gonna start off with a sketch. Now, whenever I'm doing wavy lines, I like to pick markers in the block. So let's pretend that we have a quilt block here and it's nice and square. Well, the first thing I'm gonna do is I wanna do a wavy line across the middle. And we're just gonna kind of go randomly through there. Then I'm gonna take and I'm gonna do a wavy line at the quarters. And that's looking pretty good. At this point, we totally could leave it depending on what our qualifications are for the batting. You always want to take and see what the distance is, the maximum stitch between quilting stitches. For the batting that we use, Quilter's Dream, it's actually pretty large. So if you wanted to stop at this point and just cross hatch the other way, you're good. But I like a little bit denser quilting and it doesn't take too much extra time. So at this point, we have our center and our quarters. I'm gonna go halfway down between each line. And every line here, I mean, it's kind of going the same route, but in reality, you kind of want it to be a little different so it doesn't like all these are going the same way. Like that's not great. We want it to all kind of look a little bit different. All right, so once you've completed going all one direction, we're gonna go the other direction. This is a lot easier to do when you're working on a home sewing machine than it is on a long arm, because on a long arm, you're either gonna have to have a lot of stops and starts, or you're gonna have to physically unload the long arm, turn it 90 degrees, and then do this all again. So it's up to you. When I'm doing wavy lines on the long arm, I usually am just going one way. I usually am not doing cross hatching. All right, but here's how we would do it. Now we're gonna go across the center, and then we're gonna hit across the quarter. And because we chose to go in the middle of that, we wanna keep it nice and consistent. So we're also going to go down the middle again here. So that's looking pretty good there. Now, I don't generally mark this out. I usually use the marks on the actual pattern to be my guide. So I'll like pick a seam to sort of go over. Like if this was my center seam, I would be going back and forth over that. And same thing like with my quarter seams. Like those would be my guides on how I'm going to be going and figuring out where everything is supposed to be. I'm going to make a couple of marks with the chalk marking tool so I can see them really well, just so I've got some guides on this one. But otherwise, for your actual quilt blocks, you can use your piecing as your guide on where to place your wavy lines. One word of caution before I erase all this. Whatever you pick with, whatever you choose for your density, you need to keep that up throughout the entire quilt. Otherwise, this will look super weird. That's why what I like to do is I'll go down the center and the quarters of everything, and then I'll take a look and say, do I want more or am I good with this? And if I want more, then I'm committing to sewing it with that density for the entire quilt top. Otherwise, it's going to be weird, which is why you don't want to start off like doing a wavy line every 1 inch, because then you have to do a wavy line every 1 inch for the rest of the quilt, or it's going to look ridiculous. So it's much better to kind of go the middle of the block, the quarter of the block, and then maybe segment that if you're feeling like it. And then if you're really feeling like you need some dense quilting, you can segment that even further. But whatever segment you pick, that's what you need to do for it all. All right, so for this one, I'm just gonna mark at 5 1/4 on each side. And that's really the only markings I'm gonna mark here. I just wanna kind of know where my halfway points are because I can eyeball the rest of that. All right, so the organic wavy lines I'm going to do are going to change direction at a much greater frequency than the stencil we chose. That's because I find it a lot easier to do smaller movements like this than nice big ones like before when I'm working on the domestic. Now I'm just kind of trying to aim for that point. So that's a good spot. All right, so line 1 is done. All right, so now I'm gonna just stitch over until I'm about maybe a quarter of the way here. And that's about halfway. That'll be good enough. All right, so now we're just gonna do that. I'm not trying to match the same curve as before. I am really just trying to do my own thing here so that it looks super organic and fun. Because we are not machines, we are people. All right, now we're gonna come over and do the other quarter. All right, that's looking pretty good. About halfway in between. And I'm just kind of moving the fabric back and forth as I'm pushing it back. There's really not a rhyme or reason to it in terms of when I'm going back and forth. Just trying to keep kind of a steady look going there. All right, so now we've got our 3, so here's our quarter and a half. So I know I'm gonna do more, but you could certainly stop here if you're close enough with your batting. But I'm gonna go ahead and do another one down the centers. Again, I'm not trying to match a line on either side. I'm doing my own thing here because I want it to be really fun. And since there's no point to stop on, what I'm doing is I'm moving one hand at a time. That way I can really easily kind of fill this in without having to stop and start and then come up with that gentle wave. Okay, let me hit this quarter. Now we're going to hit our other side, hitting in between those lines. I should note that I really tend to do longer waves when I'm on the long arm because I've got a wider field of vision and I'm working with a bigger space. But on the domestic, it's a lot easier to kind of keep things nice and tight and just do little motions back and forth. All right, last pass, then we're trying to do those cross hatches. All right, so I don't have to break my thread. I'm gonna go ahead and stitch in that batting until I get to my halfway point. Then we're going to turn the block. Again, you could not do this if you're working with a big quilt, but it totally works for quilt as you go. All right, I've now hit my block center. We're just going to repeat everything. Just this time we're crossing. Move one hand and then the other. Just nice, slow, and gentle. Kind of like you're putting a baby down to sleep. No sudden movements. You don't want to mess that up. All right, we're going to quilt over and do the quarter. Now, since I know for sure that I'm gonna be going in between these as well, I'm just gonna hit this whole side at once. All right, this entire side's done. Now we've got to fill in the other side. We're gonna start, even though I know I'm filling it in between, I'm still gonna go and fill in this quarter mark first. That way I've kind of split it in half, and I'm much more likely to end up with nice evenly spaced pieces. Even with this one, we really just did 4 tiny little marks in the edges. It's still gonna look pretty uniform when it's all done, because of the way we tackled the order of the quilting. Now this is a really cool design. I love the way this cross-hatched wavy lines goes. It's super easy. All you got to do is go down your center first, then divide that in half to get your quarters. And then if you want to stop there, that's fine. Turn it and go the other direction. But you also can have the option to get a little bit denser. Now I basically split this into 8ths, but you could bisect this as much as you want to create as much density as you want. I really like this look. It did not take a lot of time at all. I filmed this entire video in 15 minutes, including introducing the whole thing to you. So the actual quilting part of it is really pretty quick. So this is a great one for an all over design. You also could do some block filler with this. Really, you could have a lot of fun with it. I think it's very versatile, looks adorable, great for modern quilts, great for kids quilts. Really just a great one to just get your feet wet when you are going in the free motion quilting land. This is a good one to start with. All right, just a reminder that we have kits available for this in 4 different colorways. You can have a nice solid fabric so you can see what you're doing, as opposed to trying to see your stitches through that ugly fabric that you regret buying and you figured you might as well use it for practice. But this way you'll have a nice pretty quilt when it's all done, and your stitching will be the star of the show. We also have stencil packs. You can get the muscle memory down, and pounce pads that you can get if you do want to use your own fabric. And don't forget to grab that pattern, which contains instructions on how to do this, both for your home sewing machine and for your long arm. Thanks so much for following along, and stay tuned for the next one where we're going to talk about changing scale. All right, until next time, happy quilting.